What's going on, guys? Boss6 here, back to your video, and today, well, it's that time of year again, folks, where I talk about yet another discography ranking, and well, I'm wearing the shirt, and of course, I'll be ranking all of these studio albums from none other than the late, great Prince of Darkness himself, Ozzy Osbourne. This has been an interesting discography to go through, and I know there are quite a few Ozzy fans here on my channel that haven't really been too vocal on my channel when talking about how Ozzy's legacy has been, and of course his stuff in Sabbath as well. But I feel like it's appropriate to talk about this particular discussion and basically how Ozzy meant to a lot of people, and to myself included. So there are going to be some things that I will be praising Ozzy for. But I will be honest here, folks. This is a discography I was a little on the fence about, mainly because there has been a cutoff point with me for Ozzy, as I stated before in the past, and I'll go into further detail with that when I get to those albums in question. So yeah, this has been a very interesting discography to go through for Ozzy, considering that we're approaching the month of June, where he would unfortunately pass away, and I feel like it's appropriate for me to at least try to what am I trying to say? Trying to pay proper respect to the Prince of Darkness himself. Now, before I get into the backstory with Ozzy, how did I get into Ozzy himself? Well, when I was around 8 or 9 years old, I was growing up. I listened to rock music, but I was mainly listening to the country variety. Like Jason Aldean, Luke Bryan, Eric Church, even some of the old stuff like Tim McGraw, and of course the classic like Johnny Cash and all that stuff. But when I got into bands like, Slipknot, and then I got into a little more hard rock like AC/DC to an effect, Ozzy was one of the first few bands that I did listen to. And yes, I will admit I did listen to GNR, but we don't talk about that time period. But Ozzy was one of the first more like metallic acts I have listened to growing up. Obviously for the song Crazy Train as a whole, and then after a while, I kind of just grew out of it because I did listen to some of his later stuff, and I'm like, not really big into this stuff personally. And then I started wanting to listen to more some of his classic stuff, and I listened to like Blizzard of Oz, Diary of a Madman, No More Tears, and so on and so forth. And I eventually came around to Ozzy when I fully listened to the entire Sabbath discography, including his days in Sabbath, and I've had a newfound appreciation for him. Now, in terms of the discography as a whole, his whole entire solo career, I'm not going to bullshit you and say this has been one of the best solo careers of all time. In terms of profit and in terms of sales-wise, you can argue for this. In terms of being like maybe a more metal act, you can argue for this. Of course, you have like the other like big hits like Phil Collins and Tina Turner and Michael Jackson, obviously. But this man was a walking money factory up until he went into the fucking ground. So, yeah, the fact that this dude basically could have just, basically, son of a bitch, sorry, still battling some congestion. The fact that this guy could have easily just walked down Wall Street and just empty out all of his money and yet still make millions at the end of the day is a literal testament to the utter presence of Ozzy as a whole. So, yeah, to say that Ozzy was not influential to heavy metal and to the hard rock community is a glorified disservice, to say the least. So, folks, with that being said, let's get into this wild, crazy-ass discography. Let's bite the head off a bat, snort some cat piss on the side of a sidewalk, and snort some ants in front of Motley Crue, hopefully not that last one, and join me as I do my best to pay my homage to the Prince of Darkness themselves, Ozzy Osbourne. So, we get to the prologue story of this video here. So, what was Ozzy doing before he became the legendary solo act that we all know and love? Well, Ozzy was in the blues band named Earth, which some of you guys might know became a little act by the name of Black fucking Sabbath, and of course the Sabbath we all know and love. After making some legendary albums in the 70s, the self-titled debut, Paranoid, Master of Reality, Volume 4, Sabotage, and of course Sabbath Blaze Sabbath, things were looking high for the entire band, both literally and medically in terms of drug choice. However, there was some tension between Ozzy and the guys starting around the Sabbath Blaze Sabbath and Sabotage sessions, with Ozzy having his few infamous Ozzy leaves the band scares around this time. But things came to an ugly forehead during the Technical Ecstasy and Never Say Die albums, with Ozzy basically just going out and just leaving during the recording session that infamously had Dave Walker, Fleetwood Mac fame, come in to do some demos of which are still on the interwebs, by the way. But Ozzy came back into the recording studio because they felt like Ozzy was more needed in the band, and he was back for about 15 minutes before eventually getting fired by Iommi through Bill Ward, who was Ozzy's best friend at the time, who was his best friend. And thus, that sent Ozzy into a mad spiral, locking himself in a hotel room for 3 months straight, doing all the coke and booze in the world, and getting his brain smashed in entirety. After continuing to destroy himself, then famed manager Don Arden walked in and showed up and signed Ozzy to Jet Records and introduced Ozzy to his daughter Sharon Arden, and that would become the Sharon Osbourne we all know and well know anyway. I'll get to that here in a little bit as well, because there are some things people tend to forget about Ozzy during this time frame. So, Don was actually trying to convince Ozzy to come back to Sabbath. Don was actually Sabbath's manager at the time as well, but Ozzy didn't really feel like doing that, and he later attempted to convince Ozzy to name his new band the Son of Sabbath, which Ozzy denied and did not want to do. And also Sharon attempted to convinced Ozzy to form a supergroup with Thin Lizzy drummer Gary Moore, but plans ultimately fell through. So in late 76, under the Ardens' management, Ozzy formed the Blizzard of Oz, featuring a stacked lineup that is still legendary to this very day, consisting of featuring bassist of Rainbow and future Uriah Heep legend, Bob Daisley, who I believe would later go on to be a songwriter for Ghost, if I remember correctly. The almighty guitarist Randy Rhoads of the then act Quiet Riot, which it is actually the same Quiet Riot that actually went on to become a smash hit in the early 80s, but that was before the 80s actually hit, by the way. And also drummer Lee Kerslake of Uriah Heep, and of course the almighty Don Airey on keyboards, who will go on to be in a myriad of other bands, including the almighty Black Sabbath, the legendary Judas Priest, the almighty Anthem, by the by, of course Rainbow, Deep Purple, and a myriad of other bands that he will be playing in. But Don was more of a session musician. So, after getting the lineup, Ozzy would get his first solo album, being co-written by both Bob and Randy. And into the studio they went, which was, I believe, released on Epic Records. And on September 12th, 1980, Ozzy would brace himself for the glorious nature of a solo career, starting with the Blizzard of Oz. This has become one of the most awe-inspiring comebacks in the history of metal music. Between this and, of course, the almighty Alice Cooper's Welcome to My Nightmare Rebound, this one is basically the one that started all with Ozzy, and this is an all-time classic through thick and thin, no matter what. Of course, absolutely classic stuff throughout. Obviously, the big hits off this album are absolutely legendary, like Crazy Train, Goodbye to Romance, Mr. Crowley, and the awesome that is I Don't Know. Now, where did I rank this album in terms of the overall discography? This is my number 3. Now, I will say objectively, this is the best Ozzy album. However, it's not the best in terms of personally. I'll get to the personally here later. But basing off of it objectively, this is the best Ozzy album no matter what. The production is kind of raw sounding, but it's still really cool. It's still got the more kind of awesome synth work done by Don Airey, the awesome riffs by Randy Rhoads, the awesome bass work, of course, by Bob Daisley, and just killer drum work from Lee as well. Of course, I Don't Know, Crazy Train, which is one of the most iconic songs of all time, featuring one of the best solos of all time. Goodbye to Romance is an awesome, haunting love ballad that is absolutely great. Suicide Solution, which did get Ozzy in a little bit of controversy a couple of years afterwards, but the actual subject matter of this album is basically Ozzy talking about his own alcohol problems, and not to mention the alcohol problems of one Bon Scott, actually, before Bon would actually pass away and Brian Johnson would come in for AC/DC. But yeah, that would get him some controversy as well. But that's a cool song. It's catchy. It's groovy. It's all that fun stuff. Of course, the iconic Mr. Crowley with that synth work as well, which is absolutely awesome. No Bone Movies. That's a full-on Van Halen song. I can honestly hear like David Lee Roth like ripping on that song. And yeah, that's a cool song as well. Revelation Mother Earth is kind of a weird song, but I somewhat enjoy it. Not one of the better tracks in my personal opinion, but still good for what it is. And of course, Steal Away the Night is actually a bit of a deep cut on this album as well. And this one I have here, which is a 2011 reissue, actually has the bonus tracks of You Looking at Me, Looking at You, and some other stuff as well. But yeah, top to bottom, I cannot deny this album's influence that it left on the metal world. This became a smash hit overnight. I'll get into further detail of that in just a second. But yeah, absolutely classic stuff no matter what. It's a bona fide stud in the metal genre. It's absolutely recommended. Check this out. My number 3. So, like I just said, this album became a smash hit almost instantly and became one of the first few albums among the 100 best sellers of the 80s to go platinum without a top 40 single. And actually, in August of 97, it became quadruple platinum, and Bill Ward became bitter because of the success. So, yeah, a little bit of tension still between Ozzy and Bill there, but Sabbath doesn't need to be whining and complaining about Ozzy going on to be a successful solo career. They brought up a little guy by the name of Ronnie James Dio and made a little album you guys might know called Heaven and Hell. And that started the Ozzy and Dio rivalry, which a lot of people still to this very day still say that Ozzy was trying to get a one-up on Sabbath. And that started the Ozzy or nothing man arguments that we still hear to this very day. And folks, I have to say this. I'm going to say this till the fucking cows come home. And I'm going to say this until I can't no more. Ozzy nor Dio are Black Sabbath. They never have, and they never will be. Who is Black Sabbath? Iommi is. Fucking deal with it. Moving on. So, after that little neat discussion, it was studio time. Already back into the recording studio, this time with famed producer Max Norman co-producing the album. And I actually brought up Max Norman on my Death Angel ranking, I believe when he did Act 3, believe it or not. And so, October of 1981 comes around. Excuse me. So yeah, October of 1981 comes around. There's no specific date on when this album was actually released, but Ozzy and the gang will go back into the recording studio and bring up the follow-up, Diary of a Madman. Oh boy. I know a good YouTuber and a fellow friend of the channel, Hi Hunter, aka just another Heavy Metal Maniac, absolutely loves this album, and this is his favorite Sabbath album. This one is my number 5, so you're still in the top 5, but a bit of a drop off there for me. Excuse me. The reason why I have this ranked a little bit lower is because I don't think it's as strong as The Blizzard of Oz, mainly because I think the first half is so fucking good. Like, this has some of the best songs Ozzy has ever done in his entire career. Over the Mountain has an awesome drum intro, one of the best drum intros in the history of the genre. Flying High Again is an awesome anthemic rocker. You Can't Kill Rock and Roll is so damn catchy, it's a nice ballad. A Believer is a nice crunchy groove. And then the second half hits. It starts off good and it ends off strong. However, the 2 tracks in between can't really get into. Like, Tonight, not really a fan of. SATO was kind of meh, if you ask me. Little Dolls is a solid track, all things considered, even though Ozzy's voice is a little odd on that song. However, the title track, fucking awesome. I love that song. That is one of the best Ozzy songs they have ever done, period. Full stop. And weirdly enough, that's not even the longest song on the entire album. You Can't Kill Rock and Roll is almost 7 minutes, but that is damn near perfection right there, if you ask me. And you might sense a little bit of a theme that I'm about to say here. This personally might be Randy Rhoads' best guitar work. I think the guitar tone's a little more crunchier on this album. I think the production as a whole is a little more crunchier, if you ask me. I think, the drums have a little bit more punch to the mix, and Ozzy just sounds fucking awesome on this album. The only thing I wish I could have beefed up a little bit in the mix is maybe the bass, but, who really cares? It's the 80s. They never really did that shit anyway to begin with, unless you're David Lee Roth, I guess. I don't fucking know. Or Lemmy, I should say. But, yeah, this is still a killer album, but if it was a little more consistent, this might have been actually my number 2, but it's my number 5. Still a killer album, though. Make no mistake, it is a classic. Get this album if you haven't already. My number 5. So this album was also a success, with Ozzy stating in an autobiography that Diary of a Madman was his favorite album, and not really hard to see why. After Diary, though, we get some lineup changes. Former Black Oak, Arkansas drummer Tommy Aldridge will replace Lee, and former Quiet Riot bassist Rudy Sarzo will replace Bob. Initially, Tommy was the original choice, but chose Gary for commitment reasons. In early July, though, the infamous bat incident happened, and this whole thing started off a huge string of incidents that started for the Ozman. So, in early July of '82, Ozzy was either doped up or drunk off his ass, and he was performing in a show in front of a huge crowd of people. And somebody in the audience, I don't know why they did this, presumably brought a bat onto the stage. It wasn't a rubber bat, it wasn't a baseball bat, it wasn't even Sting's bat. An actual bat, the animal, was actually thrown onto the stage. And the guy that claimed to bring the bat in claimed it was dead. However, Ozzy thought it was simply different. Ozzy, again, has no fucking clue what's going on, grabs the bat, bites its head off, and then presumably spills blood into the crowd. Now, that part didn't actually happen. That was just a rumor. But Ozzy thought it was a rubber bat and did not know it was an actual bat until apparently he felt the thing twitch in his mouth. What the fuck? This incident really reminds me of the whole Alice Cooper chicken incident, where Alice was infamously famed for killing a chicken on live stage and spilling blood and guts into the stage, when in reality that's not what happened. Somebody brought a chicken onto the stage and Alice put it back into the crowd and the whole thing got disintegrated. It's like, what is with animals going on metal stages and absolutely getting their shit kicked in? And this whole started the whole hoax of Ozzy going around biting the heads off of animals like your pet turtle wouldn't last 5 seconds. But that turned out to be a complete fraud, and Ozzy presumably had to get rabies shots in his ass for a good amount of time. And Ozzy basically said in an interview, "It is not a fun time to basically get rabies shots." You think? Holy shit, dude. No wonder why you were more fucked up than you already are. Oh, man. Those kinds of stories I absolutely love, because it's like, holy shit, that actually happened. But that was not the only thing that happened. A month later, I'm not even kidding you, a month later, so Ozzy is suffering from rabies, and then a month later, Ozzy was again drunk off his ass, and him and Sharon were at the Alamo, and while wearing Sharon's dress, Ozzy basically pissed all over the Alamo cenotaph. Good job. Good job there, man. And then Ozzy was arrested and banned from the venue for a decade. Good job, everybody. But while the fun and wild nature of Ozzy was hitting full effect, it was nothing compared to the unfortunate tragedy that happened to Ozzy and the band as a whole. So, in March of '82, during the Diary Tour, tragedy would strike the band. While the band was in Florida, a light aircraft that was piloted by Andrew Aycock, the band's bus driver, was carrying Randy Rhoads and Rachel Youngblood, who was the band's makeup artist or the makeup and costume designer at the time. Unfortunately, crashed while performing low passes under the band's tour bus. The left wing of the plane clipped the bus, crashed, causing the plane to hit a tree and crash into a garage near a mansion, killing Andrew, Randy, and unfortunately Rachel simultaneously. And this crash was ruled as poor judgment by the pilot and misjudging clearance of obstacles. And this death really shook the rock and metal world at the time, considering that, this band was on such a high, and unfortunately this kind of caused a big, kind of halted the band's momentum at this point. And this was a big one. This was a big one here. And this also caused a what if factor. Like, what if Randy didn't pass in '82? Do you think who they ultimately get to replace him and Jakey Lee would become a big name in the metal world with the next 2 albums with Ozzy? Where does, Zakk Wylde come into the fray? Will Zakk later go on to be on the other albums for Ozzy later on in his career? Potentially. We'll never know. And that is unfortunately what life is. Life is always full of what ifs, and this was one of the big ones. So, rest in peace, Randy, rest in peace, Andrew, and rest in peace, Rachel. You guys are severely missed. And the tour's canceled for 2 weeks as Ozzy, Sharon, and Tommy went to LA, as Rudy remained in Florida for family. And this hit Ozzy big time. He thought that, getting kicked out of Sabbath was bad. This was somehow even worse for him, and he went into a deep depression shortly after Randy's passing. And I would too, man. If I knew somebody that I was getting along with and becoming really good friends, just pass away in that manner, fuck, dude, I would want to, go into a depression myself. But Ozzy would, they would, power through, do it in dedication to Randy. and they were trying to find replacements. Now, apparently, Gary Moore was approached, but refused, essentially. So, with a 2-week deadline of trying to find a new guitarist to resume the tour, they get Rudy's brother, Robert Sarzo, for the tour. But they would hire a former Gillan guitarist in Gillan's solo career, and Bernie Tomer, who was promised from Jet Records that he would have the job, but once Sharon realized that Jet already paid Bernie in advance, they once they already found out about it, it backfired. So they essentially hire Bernie instead of Roberts. Yeah, that was a bit fucked up. However, though, this backfired due to Bernie's bluesier styles didn't really mesh with the live crowd. After a handful of shows, he would inform Sharon that he returned to England to do more solo material. So they were in search for a new guitarist. They held an audition in a hotel room, and Ozzy ultimately selected former Night Ranger guitarist Brad Gillis to finish the tour. Now, the tour culminated with the Speak of the Devil live album, which was basically covers of Sabbath, because Ozzy was still a little bit bitter around this time, because I believe around this time, too, that Ozzy had a midget, or a dwarf, I should say, not a midget, it's a dwarf, named Ronnie, and basically made the dwarf, like, praise Ozzy, and basically he, calling him Ronnie because of Dio, and even hung the fucking thing on stage. Like, holy shit, dude. You bitter much there, sir? So, yeah, that came out in 82. And also in July of 82, July 4th, 1982 to be exact, Ozzy and Sharon would get married. Now, before anyone says anything, yes, Ozzy was previously married. He was married to a woman named Thelma Riley, and I believe had 3 kids, I believe. I think 3 of them were daughters, if I remember correctly. And I believe around the time that Ozzy was meeting Sharon, either he was already divorced or he was still in the marriage with Thelma. I don't really know, the details are a little bit fuzzy with that, but yeah, that happened, and Don Arden was not too happy about it, and I'll explain this failed revenge plot here in just a little bit. So then 1983 comes around, and some interesting things happen at the Ozzy camp around this time. One, before they get the guitarist they ultimately get, George Lynch briefly auctioned, because a little bit of backstory here. George claims that before he joined Don Dokken's group, which was titled Don Dokken, he initially didn't want to join because he thought he would break it big with Ozzy. That lasted all of 15 minutes before eventually George came crawling back to Dokken, and still to this very day, George believes that Don stole the band from him. Bullshit, sir. You thought you were going to break it big with Ozzy. Dokken gave you a contract. You didn't want to do that. You didn't last in Ozzy, and therefore you got kicked out crawling back to Dokken. So, fuck you, George Lynch, right there. So, that went up like a fart in church. And also, Sabbath released Born Again as a failed revenge plot against a fuck you to Ozzy and Sharon. And guess what? It bombed terribly because Ian Gillan was on vocals. Production was terrible. You know, it's been documented already. I'm not going to go into too much detail about it. If you want more information, check out my Sabbath ranking that I did. But yeah, basically, that didn't go well. And after all those things, after the Lynch experimentation, they would finally get a new guitarist, former Rat guitarist actually, Jakey Lee, who became a bit of an underground hero around that time. And, Jakey finally managed to find a gig with Ozzy, which was a huge deal at the time. So after finding a replacement for Randy, they go into the recording studio. On November 14th, 1983, We Were All Howling, Bark at the Moon. Now, I know my good buddy Ricky loves this album. Ricky, a.k.a. Horror Master. If you're watching this, Ricky, love you, bro. And I know this album is more a dedication to Randy Rhoads, and a lot of stuff happened around this time. This is going to be a controversial pick. This is my number 8. This album, to me, has 3 really good tracks. Everything else I just did not care for, or I just found a little bit forgettable. I just think the problems with this album is that I think the songs are very straightforward. There's not a whole lot of variety to them. And number 2, the absence of Randy is felt very much on this album. And nothing against Jakey Lee. I think the dude's an underrated guitarist, but it just didn't feel the same without Randy. Like no disrespect to Jakey, but I felt like they were trying to make Jakey fill in Randy's shoes when it was not really going to happen. And I felt like the band were still grieving over Randy's loss. Kind of like, in some ways, how Metallica was still grieving over Cliff Burton's sudden passing a couple of years afterwards. And they were bringing Jason Newsted, and he really didn't hone into his craft until the albums afterwards. That's what I felt like with this album here. Now, don't get me wrong. The title track is a bona fide stud. That is an instant classic and a great song to jam at Halloween as well. Rock and Roll Rebel is catchy as shit, and Waiting for Darkness is an awesome, haunting, somber track. And it's honestly one of Ozzy's more underrated songs, but everything else just doesn't really do much for me. The album cover is iconic, but just didn't really do anything in the outset for me, unfortunately. So, yeah, I'm sorry, guys. I'm just not a big fan of Bark at the Moon. So, yeah, it's just not really anything to really gravitate towards. And out of the 80s albums, it is by far the weakest of his entire discography. So, Bark at the Moon is my number 8. I'm sorry, guys. So despite some mixed results, this album did sell like hotcakes, and within weeks it became certified gold and sold 3 million copies in the States because, again, Ozzy was a fucking walking money factory at this point. So during the Bark at the Moon tour, Daisley would leave due to an agreement with Ozzy and enter future Badlands bassist Greg Chassian. While Ozzy liked Greg's playing, he didn't think he fit the band's image. Enter Phil Sousian to record the album. Now, at first, Bob was not credited for his songwriting on the initial pressing, though Bob did not receive credit on the subsequent pressing as well. So, I guess fuck you, I guess. Now, for the demos for this new album, future Y&T and Megadeth drummer Jimmy DeGracio worked with Jake and Bob, but it fell through due to Ozzy during a brief reunion with Sabbath for Live Aid in '85. That actually did happen, by the way. However, in '83, going back a little bit, Ozzy would find himself in controversy yet again. And this would start a string of controversies for Ozzy. I mean, the 80s as a whole was a massive fucking, fever, I wouldn't say a fever dream. It was just, a whole bunch, what the fuck's going on? But Ozzy would find himself in controversy again in '83 when a Canadian teenager named James Jollymore murdered a woman and her 2 sons after listening to the title track every single day, and this caused the man to go on a killing spree, and unfortunately, it cost him 2 lives. So, yeah, that really did leave a bit of a stain on Ozzy right there. And I mean, yeah, Bark at the Moon's iconic, but this dude was listening to this shit religiously, and it got to the point where the dude just full on snapped. And Ozzy around this point was the whole part of the quote satanic panic bullshit, whatever. He was accused of being a Satan worshiper, and a lot of people were accused of being, quote, devil worshippers and all that bullshit. But, again, in '84, another controversy would happen with Ozzy, where a teenager in California named John Molcomb committed suicide while listening to Suicide Solution. It actually happened again in 1990. So, yeah, like I said, Suicide Solution wasn't actually talking about committing the act. It was actually talking about, overcoming your demons and basically, finding a solution to your problems, essentially. But unfortunately, that's not how the media works, unfortunately. So Ozzy had to go into court for like 5 fucking times to say, no, that shit never happened, and so on and so forth. So Phil and the new drummer, Randy Castillo, would actually replace Bob and Jimmy once the recording started. And around this time, Ozzy returned from rehab for substance abuse. Now, the original title for this new album would be titled Killer of Giants. They got changed at the last minute. So after getting a new lineup and getting legendary producer Ron Nevison, it was studio time. And on January 27th, 1986, we would embrace The Ultimate Sin. This is my number 2. This album, I think, gets a little too much shit from people, and for reasons I will never understand, I don't get the hate for this album. I think from top to bottom, this is Ozzy's, crowning achievement in terms of going to what the signs of the times and still embracing your core sound. People sometimes bitched about the synthesizers on this album. I'm literally thinking to myself, have you not heard Mr. Crowley? Have you not heard damn near every Ozzy song that has ever been written in existence? Of course it's going to be poppy sounding. Glam and hair metal were the big thing at the time. Look at Judas Priest Turbo. Look at Motley Crue. Look at Rat. Look at any other fucking glam band at the time. That shit was printing money. And guess what? Ozzy took a gamble at it, and it paid off, in my opinion. There's some catchy fucking songs on here. The catchiest album that Ozzy has ever done his entire career, in my personal opinion. And probably one of his more heavier songs, too, because this is pretty heavy, even for the style that they're going for. Like the title track, for example. That is a catchy-ass mid-tempo song. Secret Loser, the opening to that riff full-on sounds like a Saxon song from Strong Arm of the Law or Wheels of Steel, for God's sake. Never Know Why, catchy as shit. Thank God for the Bomb is an anthem to end all anthems. Never, catchy as shit. Lightning Strikes, catchy as shit. Killer of Giants is melodic but awesome. Fool Like You is an underrated deep cut, if you ask me, that has some great riffs and melodies. And of course, Shot in the Dark is just awesome. That is a banger of a song through and through. Now, unfortunately, I don't have the original, the album cover. It's just a remaster. But look at that album cover, dude. That album cover's fucking boss, if you ask me. I don't understand why people give this album a lot of shit. I honestly think it is one of Ozzy's best albums, and this is going to start the holy trinity of albums, if you ask me. The crowning achievements of Ozzy starts with The Ultimate Sin, if you ask me, because the next two are bona fide studs, if you ask me. So yeah, number 2, The Ultimate Sin. I love that album through and through. It gets my devil's horn, number 2 for me. And this became Ozzy's highest charting album, going platinum in May and went double platinum in 1994, selling over 2 million worldwide. So despite its success, Ozzy cites this as his least favorite due to the production. And I don't really get that per se. Apparently he said that apparently the producer was kind of holding him back a little bit. I personally think the production's great for what it's going for. Granted, yeah, sometimes some things sound a little bit muffled, but I honestly think the production's fantastic for the album. So, opinions assholes, I guess. But a couple of months after The Ultimate Sin, Ozzy would make a famous appearance at WrestleMania 2, accompanying the British Bulldogs, who I believe faced the Dream Team I believe that was the main event of the Rosemont portion of the show. And Ozzy literally looked like a fucking fan just walked into the ring. So he had no idea where he was at, most likely. So in 1987, a big split would happen. And this was a massive what the fuck moment where Jakey Lee, out of nowhere, got canned by Sharon Osbourne for reasons. I don't really know. I couldn't find any details. Most likely due to money issues. But again, I never understood why Jakey got canned. Because I forgot to mention this on the Ultimate Sin. I think that was Jakey Lee's best performance. Because at least he was able to shine on that album. But I don't know. That was always been a little bit of a odd thing for Jakey to get canned like that early. Like, again, like he literally came in and then 4 years later, oh no, you're gone. What the fuck? Like, I don't get it. Now, apparently in an interview later on, apparently when Jakey was invited to come back to do, I believe, touring sessions with Ozzy, he would agree only if he got writing credits for the Bark at the Moon album. He said he didn't want any money, no royalties, no nothing. He just wanted his writing credits for the Bark at the Moon album. He told one of the higher-ups, said that they'll give him a call back, did not return his phone. Yeah, that happened. So Phil would also leave, and Bob would actually rejoin. Now, Ozzy would continue to struggle with chemical dependency. That year would be the 5-year anniversary of Randy's passing, and released the tribute album in 1987. Now, in 1988, Ozzy would appear in The Decline of Western Civilization 2, The Metal Years, and told the director that sobriety fucking sucks, essentially. Meanwhile, they were looking for a replacement for Jakey, and Ozzy recruited Zakk Wylde. And Zakk and Ozzy would basically have a nice buddy-buddy relationship as the years would go on. So after requiring Zakk on guitars, getting keyboardist John Sinclair, and getting a pretty well-known producer by the name of Roy Thomas Baker, it was studio time. In October of 1988, doesn't have a specific date, we would get No Rest for the Wicked. This is my number 4. Again, man, I think we're on a hot streak of Ozzy albums right here. Starts with The Ultimate Sin, and we get this bad boy here as well. This is fucking incredible from start to finish. And welcome to the band here, Zakk. You're going to be here for a little bit, but holy damn, this thing is fucking sweet from start to finish. The energy is up in the mix. The production, even though it is a little more of a live album sound in my opinion, it's really damn good for that time frame. I will say the complaint I do have with the production is that the drums are a little, like, far back sounding in my opinion, but it doesn't take away from just how killer these songs are. Like, from top to bottom, this has some of Ozzy's, like, best material here. Like, Miracle Man, which is a nice fuck you to Jimmy Swaggart, which, for those of you who don't know who Jimmy Swaggart was, he was a Christian televangelist. We all love those, right? Who basically claims that metal and rock is the music for Satan and all that bullshit. He even called Stryper, a well-known Christian metal band, wolf in sheep's skin. I'm not even joking. That's legit what happened. Around this time frame, though, Jimmy was actually caught in controversy with the whole prostitution scandal that he suffered, which basically TLDR was basically he got caught with, like, a prostitute or something like that, or he, like, paid off a prostitute or something like that, and they had this whole fucking, like, crocodile tear thing saying, "I've sinned against you, my lord," and all that shit. It was hilarious to see looking back on it. Devil's Daughter, Holy War is catchy as all shit. Crazy Babies is catchy as all hell. Nice groove to it. Breaking All the Rules is nice and melodic. Again, really sounds like a Van Halen song in all honesty. Bloodbath in Paradise talks about the Manson family murders, which is great. Fire in the Sky honestly sounds like a continuation of the Ultimate Sin sound, in all honesty. That's a killer fucking song and a great hit off the album. And Demon Alcohol is a banger as well. The only two tracks I really couldn't get into is Tattoo Dancer and Hero, but they didn't really ruin the album enough for me to, knock it at all. But yeah, I would say out of all the Ozzy albums, this is, in my opinion, his most underrated album. I think this is killer shit. And no mistake here. Again, Ozzy was on a tear at this point, and we haven't even gotten to the peak of it yet. I'll get to that here in just a minute. But yeah, this is just some killer shit. No ifs and or buts about it. My number 4, No Rest for the Wicked. So this was another smash hit, going double platinum and selling 2 million albums in the States. It reached number 13 on the Billboard Top 200. While on tour, Bob was out, and Bob would leave and enter former Sabbath member Geezer Butler to help fill out for the remainder of the tour. And that wasn't the only time that Butler was making rounds with former Sabbath members, because around that time as well, that's when the Lock Up the Wolves tour for Dio was happening, and Geezer would join them as well, ultimately collabing with Ronnie coming back into the fray to do the Dehumanizer album in 1992. So around this time, Ozzy would do the infamous Lita Ford collab and possibly some lovey things. Let's just say that. Allegedly. Close My Eyes Forever became a smash hit. And it reached number 8 on the Billboard Hot 100. Oh boy, it might be having some controversy here. It's okay. It's an okay ballad. I'm kind of sick of hearing it. It's a little bit overrated, if you ask me. But people like it. Cool. I think it's just meh, in all honesty. So, Ozzy would also appear on Billboard's solo debut album, and a couple months later, the live EP titled Just Say Ozzy was released. So this new album would actually be produced by Dwayne Barron and mixed by famed producer Michael Wagner. Yes, that Michael Wagner. And a couple songs would be co-written by Lemmy of Motorhead, and Alice in Chains bassist Mike Inez would be credited on the album, even though he didn't perform on it. But more on Mike here in a little bit. So yeah, a little bit of nice stuff right there. You're just breaking into the scene. You just came out with Facelift, which was a big hit. And you're already going to be collabing with Ozzy within like a year. That's fucking cool if you ask me. So, on September 17th, 1991, we would get the peak of Ozzy's solo career, in my personal opinion. No More Tears. This is my number 1. This was my number 1 Ozzy album for a long, long, long time, and I cannot express how much I fucking love this album. This was the first Ozzy album I ever listened to in full. I jammed the title track a shit ton when I was in high school, and then, of course, I listened to songs like Hellraiser, Time After Time, and especially Mr. Tinker Train, which, for my money, possibly the best Ozzy opener of all time. The weird, sample of, kids playing, and then the little toy box winding up, and it gets right to the wrist by Zach, is absolutely killer. And I might get a bit of a hot take. This is possibly Zakk Wylde's best performance ever. And that's including the stuff in BLS as well. I am dead ass honest. All of the riffs on this album stand out. The production is fantastic. Ozzy sounds immense on this album. The drum work is solid. The bass is awesome on this album. Literally, it's a fucking grand... it's so grand and awesome how this album is. Mr. Tinker Train. I don't want to change the world. I don't want the world to change me. Catchy as shit. Of course, the classic ballad of Mama, I'm Coming Home, which was played a fuck ton this past last year. And I I won't lie, I do kind of get teary-eyed when I listen to that song, considering that I still have the memory of my grandma. When she passed away, I would jam this song and another song I'll be bringing up here later quite a bit when my grandma passed, and yeah, it's still a tearjerker to this very day. And people misconstrue the lyrical context for what it was actually talking about. People thought it was talking about Ozzy's mother, which I thought for the longest time as well, but actually what Mama is represented is Sharon. Like, it's that's insane that Ozzy basically wrote a song about Sharon, and that's basically talking about Ozzy saying, I'm out of rehab, I'm coming home. And yeah, hearing him sing that song live still kind of gets me in some capacity. Desire is killer as shit. The title track, though, possibly my favorite Ozzy song of all time. I jammed the shit out of that song like a few years ago, and I remember it note for note, like it's in my head. Like the opening bass line is awesome, like the whole synth work, and then that riff by Zach is absolutely killer. The light in the window is a crack in the sky. Dun, 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 dun. Sorry, I had to do that. ADHD and autism does that to you folks. SIN, aka Shadows in the Night, awesome song. Hellraiser. Another bit of a hot take here. Probably my least favorite rendition of that song, believe it or not. Don't get me wrong, the song is awesome as a whole, but I think the Lemmy collab is better. I think the Motorhead version is better in my personal opinion, but it's still a classic song, so I ain't gonna bash it. Time After Time is a nice melodic anthem. Zombie Stomp is fun as all hell, even though if I had to critique that song is that the intro does kind of drag a little bit. Maybe about a minute too long. Make it about 20 seconds and then get right to the riff and we'll be good. AVH, which I believe actually talks about Ozzy's high school, if I remember correctly, which is kind of interesting. And then Road to Nowhere, which a lot of people kind of claim is a bit of a weird way to end the album. I think it ends perfectly. It's almost the same as Shot in the Dark in some ways. I can't get enough of it, man. I cannot get enough of No More Tears. Honestly, one of my all-time favorite albums. Not quite top 5, but somewhere around the top 10. Like maybe number 10 or maybe just an honorable mention. I love No More Tears. It's one of my favorite albums of all time. It's my personal favorite Ozzy album, number 1. So, this was yet another success for the Oz, man. Positive reviews, left, right, and center. And then we get into an interesting point of Ozzy's career. This was supposed to be Ozzy's final album due to fatigue and the rock and roll lifestyle basically starting to catch up to him. But we all know this was not Ozzy's last hurrah. So after No More Tears went platinum 4 fucking times yet again, the No More Tours tour commenced, and Mike would actually take over for bass while Kevin Jones played keyboards as John would tour with the Cult. Now, Mike would, or actually I just said that. So, after a couple of years go by, actually, before I actually get to that, another thing that I'd like to point out here. During this time frame, I mentioned it before, but Sabbath was doing the Dehumanizer album. And after the album was released, Ronnie James Dio was with the band still at the time. There was a point, though, where they actually opened for Ozzy, and Dio said, fuck this, and basically left. And then he would go on to go into solo career, bring back, in a way, Tony Martin, even though Tony was never fired. Bring him back, and then they would do the albums they would do after as a whole. So, this whole thing killed anything Dio-related up until The Devil You Know in 2009. Good job, everybody. So, actually, is that scratched? Oh, shit. Oh, wait, no, that's not scratched. Anyways, sorry, I got distracted. So, yeah, while that happened, 95 comes around, and we get a new lineup. Geezer will return after leaving Sabbath in 94 when he did the Cross Purposes album with Tony Martin, actually. Let's see. Keyboards will be done by Rick Aikman, who I believe Alan Rickman Wakeman, I believe. No, was it Alan or Rick? It was one of those two. They just did keyboards on the last Tailgunner album. But future Journey drummer Dean Castronovo would join as well. And around this time, the entire Ozzy catalog would be remastered and reissued. This album was also produced by Michael Beinhorn. I believe that's how you say that. And also some more collabs will go on with this album as well. So, on October 23rd, 1995, we would get Osmosis. So from here on out, and I felt like I should have stated this before, everything after number 5, it's kind of rocky, if you ask me. It goes from rocky to okay to flat out bad. We're kind of getting to the rocky stages here of Ozzy's career. This is my number 7. On initial re-listen, it's actually not as bad as I remember it. Like, when I first listened to this, I thought it was just merely okay. But as time's gone on, it grew a little bit on me in some capacity. But, there's just not a whole lot of stuff that really, I gravitate towards on this album. And I don't know, I just felt like this album didn't really do a whole lot for me personally. There's some good tracks on here, don't get me wrong, but the album as a whole doesn't really click. I do have to bring up, like, probably the biggest gripe I have with this album is the production. The production is so fucking off on this album. Like, the kick drum sounds like the dude is kicking pillows on the kick drum, and it's a very distracting. Let's see, Zach's guitar tone is very out of key. It's just a bunch of squealing noise. The bass is somewhat present on the album, and this is where the auto-tune starts kicking in for Ozzy, and it is very noticeable on this album, and unfortunately, it would kind of follow him, up until his last studio album. This was also co-produced, I believe, by Michael Wagner, but I don't know, I just wasn't a huge fan of the production. And the songs themselves are just kind of there for the most part. Although the opening track, Perry Mason, is a fucking banger. I love that song. That's legit like one of my favorite Ozzy songs. I love the more kind of epic strings that it does, and it's a heavy song. I do kind of appreciate some of the more darker tone that it's going for, but at times it becomes like poppy out of nowhere. Like Ghost Behind My Eyes, for example. Like, why is that chorus so poppy? Like, you start off with a heavy, kind of darker sound, and then you go into more poppier elements. I don't know. It was just a little bit bizarre. Thunder Underground's is a pretty nice, crunchy groover. Of course, Seal on the Other Side, which I feel like a lot of Ozzy ballads mean a lot more now, considering what happened, but that was also the song that I used to jam a lot whenever my grandma would pass, and just, like, sad moments in general. And I even actually referenced the song when I was writing down the eulogy for her. That legit happened. I unfortunately don't have the thing with me. I wish I would have kept it, but I actually did kind of reference the song a little bit. And it is nice. But yeah, Libby did co-write that song. My Jackal Doesn't Hide, kind of a dumb song, but it's heavy. I'll say that. It's got a heavy groove. Honestly, probably besides Perry Mason, probably my favorite track on here is Whole World's Falling Down. Even though the chorus is a little bland, it's a heavy fucking song. I will give him credit for that, but as a whole, Osmosis isn't bad. I just felt like it was just a product of 1995. Not terrible. Far worse albums were made in 1995, but the album as a whole, it's okay. It's fine. It's there. It was released. There were songs on there. There was riffs. That's about it. That's just about it for me, personally. Again, nothing terrible, but nothing that I really gravitate towards to. So it is my number 7. So this album got mixed reviews, but it did go certified platinum by the end of the year, because of course it did. And by 1995, it went double platinum, because of course it did, because it's Ozzy. Now for touring, they get legendary guitar virtuoso Steve Vai for a live setting, and John Sinclair will return for the tour as well. Now there was a period where Zach was considering joining GNR, and Ozzy decided to replace him with former David Lee Roth guitarist Joe Holmes. Now, ultimately, the GNR thing fell through, and Zach was like, well, fuck, I'm kind of out of gig right now. Let me form my own band known as Black Label Society. So in early 96, Geezer and Dean would leave, and Mike and Randy would actually fill in for the touring. Now, ultimately, Faith No More drummer Mike Borden and former Suicidal Tendencies and future Metallica bassist Robert Trujillo would join. Yes, Robert actually was in the band for a little bit. I believe he would be on the next album too, if I remember correctly. But also in 96, the Ozfest was created by Sharon. Yes, the legendary Ozfest that we all know and love. The tour was well received, and the festival became a yearly occurrence, and apparently Sharon is bringing it back yet again. And then, now in 1997, a big announcement happened where Ozzy, Geezer, and Iommi would reunite for the Ozfest tour. Bill Ward would unfortunately suffer a heart attack, hence why he didn't appear. I believe Vinny Appice, took over for Bill at that point. He did recover for the live reunion album in 98, and when the new millennium dawned, there was supposed to be a new Sabbath album coming out in 2001 with Rick Rubin as the producer, but as I talked about in my Sabbath ranking, that thing fell through and Ozzy would go on to do more solo stuff. So yeah, Ozzy backed out. Iommi would actually go on to do some solo stuff as well with the 96 EP sessions and the awesomeness that is Fuse featuring Glenn Hughes, who was on the Seventh Store album. So a little bit of backstory there for that as well. So during that time frame as well, Ozzy and Iommi would actually go to court over the name Black Sabbath, even though Ozzy had it trademarked back in 1986. And all that bullshit happened that would continue for another few years. But before that, actually, we would get a new album with a returning Zakk Wylde with producer Tim Palmer. So, on October 21st, 2001, Ozzy would release another album where he would become down to earth. This is my number 10. Boy, you want to talk about a drop in quality. Look no further than this album. I have nothing to say about this album. Honestly, I really don't. This album to me is a massive non-event. There is nothing on this album that I honestly remember, except for maybe one song. Everything else is either forgettable or just kind of bad. I mean, the album cover kind of fucking sucks. I don't know what's going on there. I don't know if it's supposed to be creepy or not, but there's like a weird face tattoo. It's like a weird... Like, the idea was there, but it failed in execution. Like, it's nailed to a cross. There's necklaces. There's a spine. There's 3 heads going around. I don't know what the hell this is. I don't really know what the hell this is. Gets Me Through is okay. It's a decent track. Dreamer, obviously, is a huge standout. Everything else is there. It's just it's a 2000s Ozzy album where there's nothing that stands out. No riffs. Like, Facing Hell has some decent riffs, but God, Ozzy's struggling. Ozzy is struggling on that song, because holy shit, dude, are you okay? I am genuinely concerned. Like, he is struggling on that song in general. Yeah, I just mainly skipped this album. Like, I honestly, when I was listening to it on a walk, I just skipped through most of this album because I'm like, there is nothing here I can really gravitate towards. But I will admit, when I listened to the song Dreamer, I did kind of tear it up a little bit because it's like, it is a nice heartfelt ballad, I will say. But, yeah, not really anything I can really gravitate towards on it. It's just there. Nothing more, nothing less. It is my number 10. Sorry, guys. So this was somewhat successful, 19 on the UK charts. Dreamer did become a big hit, peaking at number 10 on the Billboard's mainstream rock tracks. The Live at Budokan Live album was released, which was nice. And then in June of 2002, Ozzy was invited to participate in the Golden Jubilee of Queen Elizabeth II, performing Paranoid with Iommi and Phil Collins, which is interesting to say the least. And then in 2003, this is where shit was starting to hit the fan a little bit for Ozzy. But before we get to what ultimately happened, Ozzy will recruit former Metallica bassist Jason Newsted, even though it was short-lived. And then we get some of the bad shit. Something I actually didn't find out until researching for this episode. Ozzy around this time would suffer from Parkinson's disease. Apparently from all the drugs and alcohol that he did, it really started to take a toll on his body. And somehow that wasn't even the worst thing that he would suffer from. We get to the infamous quad bike accident where in December of 2003, Ozzy was driving around in his estate on a quad bike. The thing either flipped or crashed. I don't really remember the details. But Ozzy broke his collarbone, broke 8 ribs, and suffered a neck vertebrae as well. And this guy is lucky he did not get paralyzed, because honestly, if he did, I don't even know what would have happened. I don't know if he would have continued to make albums after that. And as soon as I said neck vertebrae, my neck kind of singed up a little bit when I said that. So an operation was performed to lift the collarbone, which was believed to be resting on a major artery and interrupting blood flowing to one of Ozzy's arms. Now, according to Sharon, and this is Sharon saying this, so take this for what you will, Ozzy apparently stopped breathing after the crash, and the bodyguard, Sam Rustin, had to come and resuscitate him. But thankfully, Ozzy did survive, and he recovered, and he was back on his feet, went to the 2004 Ozfest with Sabbath. And then in March of that year, March of 2005, a box set titled Prince of Darkness was released. And on one of the discs, Ozzy did a collab with, believe it or not, he did a collab with Miss Piggy. The Born to Be Wild collab. Yes, that actually happened. And somehow, that was not even the worst collab he has done. I'll get to that one here later. But also in 2005, Ozzy would do the covers album titled Undercover. Now, I'm not going to include that on this list here because, again, it's a covers album, and homie don't do cover albums. Now, apparently one of the songs, kind of a last-minute thing, apparently one of the songs he covered was by Mountain, and apparently he met one of the guys by snorting cocaine with them. That's nice. This lineup would actually include Jerry Cantrell, bassist Chris Wines, and drummer Mike Borden. So, kind of a nice lineup there. And actually, Ozzy would actually be a judge on the X Factor, which is basically the British America's Got Talent, which is cool. So then in October 2006, the Heaven and Hell lineup would reunite. It was touring the world under the name of Heaven and Hell. So after all of the extracurricular activities, and by the way, the Heaven and Hell lineup was basically the Mob Rules lineup, essentially. So after all the extracurricular activities, and with another bassist actually joined the fray, Blasco, aka Rob Nicholas, he would actually do this the studio album's bass. So on May 22nd of 2007, Ozzy would rain down Black Rain. This is a different album cover, I'm fully aware. It's essentially This is basically what the Americans got, and not the actual CD. And actually, this album was also produced by Ozzy and Kevin Churko, I believe, who will be the producer for the next coming albums. But yeah, so Black Rain is released, and this one actually has a lot of people saying this is the worst Ozzy album. To me personally, this is my number 6. Now, don't get me wrong, it's not perfect, far from it. But out of all the Ozzy albums around this time period that I have actually grown to like the most, is weirdly enough the album that a lot of people don't like, which is kind of funny enough. But yeah, I actually think this album is pretty good for them, pretty solid for the most part. In actuality, there are some tracks I actually do like on here. Of course, the classic "I Don't Want to Stop," which for you wrestling fans was the theme song for 2007's Judgment Day for the WWE. And actually, there is live footage where Ozzy was actually performing the theme song on SmackDown. I believe I think the day, or no, I believe the SmackDown prior to the pay-per-view. Actually, a clips of it, that looked fucking awesome, I want to say. The title track, solid. The Almighty Dollars, kind of dumb, but I kind of like it. Especially that bass as well. I kind of like that. 11 Silver's pretty solid. Civilize the Universe. I do like the ballad Here For You. It is a little bit of a touching ballad. And Countdown's Begun's a decent track, all things considered. Now again, the auto-tune's a little bit much, and you can clearly hear this sounds like a full-on Black Label Society album. It's basically Black Label Society with Ozzy on vocals. So there you go, and that's like a big negative for the fans. I personally don't mind it because at least they committed to it and they just didn't half-ass it. But overall, I dig Black Rain. It's not perfect, but it's better than most of the other albums I've listened to for this ranking. So number 6 is Black Rain. I know I ranked it higher than Bark at the Moon. I know, blasphemy, but it's my list, so there you go. So yeah, number 6 is Black Rain. So despite the negative reviews, it did go gold in the States and debuting at number 3 on the Billboard Top 200. So after a couple of years, go by, and in 2008, Ozzy was searching for another guitarist, as while him and Zach didn't have a falling out, more so of Ozzy not wanting to sound like Black Label Society. So for the replacement, he would get former Dream Evil guitarist Gus G, who is a hell of a guitarist if you ask me. And also, Ozzy provided his voice and likeliness to the video game Brutal Legend and played the character the Guardian of Metal. And I swear to God, I didn't look this up, but if they don't have Lemmy as God in that game, I would be severely disappointed. I don't think they did, but that would have been fun. Around this time as well, this one always gets me. Ozzy and Sharon were the guest hosts of Raw. Yes, the famed Monday Night Raw guest host era of 2009. Good grief, that was a fucking train wreck to go through. The only good one was Bob Barker, and that was by default. That was the famous one where they were doing like this popularity contest, or like America's Got Talent, whatever spiel, and Chris Masters came out and was flexing his pecs to Crazy Train, for God's sake. Well, I don't know what was happening in 2009 either, but anyways, where are we at here? So in December of 2009, Ozzy will announce a new album, although it was originally titled Soul Sucker, but eventually got switched. So, due to negative feedback. Now, this lineup for a live setting would actually have former Alice Cooper, Ted Nugent, and Rob Zombie drummer Tommy Clufetos, I believe that's how you say his name. And although he did not drum on this album, actually the producer would do it, Kevin Churko, Tommy would get credit for this album. So, with all that out of the way, 2010 rolls around. On July 11th, Ozzy will release his next studio album, Scream! Oh, dear God. Oh, dear God, where to begin with this? I know where to begin with this. Dead fucking last. This album is cheeks. Oh my God, this album's terrible. This is one of the most pedestrian sounding albums I have ever seen. Not even Ozzy himself looks like he wants to be in this pile of dicks. This thing, I feel like, should be crimes against music. I swear to God, this album is so unbelievably bland. It's boring. Nothing happens on this album. And this album basically commits elder abuse. I'm not even kidding when I say that. Like, this album from top to bottom, oh my God, it's so bad. It is unbelievably bad. The opening track, Let It Die, oh my God, like, that is possibly the worst opener of Ozzy's entire career. It is so bad. It is absolutely bad. Like, everything is just bland, generic. There's nothing on this album that screams originality. There isn't. Like, it's so bad. It is such a bad album. Like, Digging Me Down is just drivel. Crucify is forgettable. Just all of it is so bad. It is so unbelievably bad. And this is a time frame where even old school acts were starting to come back and put on some great shit. Like Priest, yeah, they came off of Nostradamus, but they were eventually going to put out Redeemer of Souls. Cooper around this time, even though, yeah, he was kind of going through a bit of a midlife crisis with some of his albums, would eventually turn out fine at the end of the decade. Maiden, okay, yeah, Final Frontier sucked, but at least the Book of Souls was somewhat decent. The point is that at least those acts tried. With Ozzy phoning it the fuck in, and we'll see what goes out, and lo and behold, look who won the pony. Oh God, I can't stand another moment to scream, dude. It is so unbelievably bad. It's so bad, it doesn't feel organic, it feels fake, it's plastic sounding. Nothing sounds original, nothing sounds ideal. It's just the sound of a man who should have retired a long time ago, but unfortunately continued because, again, this man's a walking money factory, but what the fuck do I know? I'm just a fat-ass janitor that makes YouTube videos for entertainment, so yeah, dead last. Fuck this album. Sucks. Next! Anyways, this album was mixed in terms of reviews, in terms of viewers and critics alike. It did chart relatively well, so moving into 2011, Ozzy reconciled with Tony and the OG lineup in the reunion for a second world tour and a new album. They played their first concert of the tour in May of 2012 with Tommy on drums due to Billboard dropped due to contract issues. Bullshit, I say. Literally, the whole spiel of that entire fiasco was basically Bill was giving nothing more but pocket change, essentially, which is complete and utter dog shit, if you ask me, because Bill was fine. He had the heart attack. He was fine. You're gonna tell me that Ozzy couldn't go into a recording studio without singing to a fucking cup, but a guy who was drumming his entire ass off and had a heart attack, suddenly he gets the boot? Are you shitting me with this, man? Honestly, it is ridiculous. So then we get Brad Wilk of the highly overrated Rage Against the Machine to play on this Final Sabbath album, 13. And if you want to hear some of the most mid-drumming on an album besides Nico McBrain and Lars Ulrich, you've got a banger on your hands here, folks. If you want to hear my full thoughts on 13, just check out my Sabbath ranking too, by the way. So in November of that year, they do a live album, and sometime in 2013, Ozzy would actually suffer minor burns after a small fire at a family house. I actually did not know that until doing research for this album. So, In 2014, the Memoirs of a Madman compilation was released. And in January 2016, Sabbath announced a farewell tour and the End EP as well. So the final shows of the End tour took place at the Gantine Arena in Birmingham, and the tour to mark the 30th anniversary of No Rest for the Wicked. More tour in 2018, Ozzy would embrace on his final world tour dubbed No More Tours Tour 2, say that 5 times fast, with Stone Sour as a supporting act. Now, this was supposed to be a multi-year odyssey, but it will abruptly end due to Ozzy having an accident, suffering spinal damage in 2019. And then the world had a massive fart in 2020, which we all know what happened. And then a new album would be released with a lot of collabs and be produced by Andrew Waite. And then February 21st, 2020, Ozzy would become none other than an ordinary man. This one's my number 9. It's a step up above Scream, but what are you really approving on? I mean, this album to me has a couple standout tracks and nothing else. That's literally all I gotta really say about this album, is that it's there, it happened, it was released. And that's all I'm going to say. I mean, you look at Ozzy. Like, look at the back right there. Like, that man... It's just kind of sad to see Ozzy at that state. And I'll go into later on about talking about his health issues and all that stuff. But, yeah, there's just nothing on this album that I really grabbed. Straight to Hell, which is not a bad opening track. It's pretty straightforward. Was actually the theme song for WWE's Hell in a Cell for a couple of years before the concept went kaput. The title track's actually good. I do like the title track that actually features Elton John of all people. Believe it or not, this is not the first Elton John metal collaboration. I'm not gonna lie. He actually did a collab with Saxon back in the 80s. That actually happened, by the way. Under the Graveyard's okay. Scary Little Green Man is kind of stupid, but somewhat catchy. I won't lie. However, the collab with Post Malone, fuck no. Then when you couldn't think it got worse, the collab with not only Post Malone, but everybody's favorite famed concert apologist, and everybody's favorite run-in at WrestleMania 41, Travis Scott, appeared on an Ozzy song. I'm not even kidding. This makes the Busta Rhymes collab look like the Lita Ford collab. No. Just stop. Stop. Like, fuck no. Stop. Please, get some help. Quote Michael Jordan. No. Fuck all. No. No. No, 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 no. 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 Stop. Please. I'm like Daniel Bryan now. No. Stop that. Get some help right now. Yeah, that's all I gotta say about that album. That's all I gotta say about Ordinary Man. It happened. It's number 9. Next. Anyways, this album charted very high because of course it did. Received positive reviews and was certified gold. A week after Ordinary Man, an 8-bit video game titled Legend of Ozzy was released. And a new album was already in the works with Waite. Now, Zach would be involved in the album making, and this new album would feature a shit ton more collabs. And actually, one day before the album was released, Ozzy would actually perform for the NFL kickoff between the Bills and the Rams. And for all of my LA Rams fans out there who remember that season, I severely apologize. So, Ozzy would enter into a mental institution on September 9th, 2022, and his number will be revealed as patient number 9. This is my second to last. This is my number 11. Yeah, this album happened. It's nothing offensive. It just simply exists. And that's the only kind of thing I can only say about it. This album, from top to bottom, is just a bunch of songs with a lot of collaborations, and that's it. That is literally it. Well, the only good thing about this album is the fact that Taylor Hawkins is on this album. That is saying a lot. Now, I believe this was produced before Hawkins unfortunately passed away, which was cool. It was cool that he was able to drum on the album, but by the time the album was released, I think Hawkins had already passed. But, I mean, Naomi appeared on the album. Eric Clapton appeared on the album. Zakk Wylde got a few songs. I mean, what do you want me to say, guys? I mean, there's literally nothing on this album I can really say. It just exists. That's literally it. That's the nicest thing I could say about it. And the song Parasite was actually, is I believe still actually, the theme song for WWE for Survivor Series. So, yeah, patient number 9. It happened. That's the nicest thing I could say about it. So yeah, it's my number 11. What do you want me to do, guys? What do you want me to say? It's just a bore. I'm sorry. It's boring. I've got nothing else to say. It just drags, unfortunately. So this album would also receive positive reviews. Again, of course it did. And in September of 23, Ozzy was talking about another album in 24 while recovering from another spinal surgery. And man, you want to talk about somebody that looked like he was about to tumble or just trip at any minute. Look no further than him. Like, it was so sad to see Ozzy just even stand. It's sad. It's really, really, really sad. And I'm not going to bash a man that did what he loved. He did this for his fans. And I may be critical of him, but in terms of his albums per se, but I will not bash Ozzy the person. So that album that was being talked about in 24 never came to see the light of day. So then last July comes around, and Ozzy's health was fading rapidly. Then the Back to the Beginning show happened, which was advertised as a Final Sabbath show, but it was hampered by critics at the time, myself included, as more of an Ozzy show than it was a Sabbath show. Now, I didn't get to hear or see much of the show because I was at work at the time, but I do know some people, one of them being Walter Ball, good buddy Walt, the show. He basically said that this just feels like an Ozzy masturbation show, essentially. But knowing what we know now, I felt like that was by design. So it was a big success with 40,000 people in attendance and 5.8 million watching a live stream. Now, Ozzy was strapped to a black throne and put on an emotional performance in front of everybody, including the performance of Mama, I'm Coming Home. And even though the dude, his voice was shot and basically just nothing but dust, he put his heart and soul into that as much as he could. And all the money went to the Cure's Parkinson's Trust, Birmingham Children's Hospital, and Acorn Children's Hospice. And then the day happened. July 22nd, 2025. Ozzy would pass away at the age of 76 due to a heart attack. And I remember, I legit remember this like it was yesterday. I remember when I was at work and this was when summer school was happening, ironically enough. I remember Ricky, our good buddy Ricky, aka Horror Master. I remember when he sent that in the group chat. And I literally said to myself, no, there's no way. And it was all over social media. And we all knew. Let's not make amends about it. We all knew Ozzy was going. It was just a matter of when. And it's, ironically, it's kind of like how my dog Grace, had to get put down. Like, I knew she was going. It was just a matter of when. And I remember when that happened, I immediately put on No More Tears, and when Mama I'm Coming Home came out, I nearly teared up. I'm not gonna lie. Like, this guy never left an emotional impact on me, because again, I got into metal a little bit later in my young life. But knowing all the stuff that this guy did, and all of the shit this guy has done in his career, we're honestly shocked this guy didn't go sooner than later. Like, the Grim Reaper was basically blowing up the dude's phone for years, and then Ozzy eventually picked up the damn thing. Similar to how Lemmy did. And coincidentally, speaking of Lemmy, that kind of led to some things that I actually didn't know about at the time until I did some research about it. So there were two things that was coincidental about Ozzy's passing. Number one, it was the same amount of days between his final show and his passing. That was the same days as Lemmy. Now, Lemmy's was unintentional because he just couldn't play because his health was deteriorating by that point. And he even said that I'll be back, and then lo and behold, he passed away. But number two, 17 days, by the way, was the amount of in-between passings. But number two, and probably the biggest coincidence that out of this whole spiel, was Ozzy's final song was Paranoid. And the final words from that song. And so as you hear these words, telling you of my state, I tell you to enjoy life. I wish I could, but it's too late. You can't tell me that shit was not intentional. Ozzy knew he was going, and he said, you know what? Fuck the Grim Reaper. I'm going to do what I'm going to do. I'm going to rock out, and everybody's going to love it because I'm Ozzy goddamn Osbourne. And so that's basically what he did. He did what he loved, and everybody basically praised him for that. So after Ozzy's passing in late July, his funeral cortege left Villa Park, passing Ozzy's childhood home, and went to Broad Street, which was closed to traffic. Stopping at the Black Sabbath Bridge, where Ozzy's family was met with flowers and messages, and met with the Lord Mayor. Tens and thousands of people gathered along to watch. That same day, the band of the Coldstream Guards performed Paranoid during the changing of the guard ceremony at the Buckingham Palace. Next day, a private funeral where it was attended by family and close friends, including Elton John, Marilyn Manson, James Hetfield, Rob Zombie, Zakk Wylde, and the original Sabbath members. Ozzy was interred on the grounds of his private family estate, Welder's house. And I felt like, out of all the original members of the original Sabbath lineup, I said this before, and people have agreed with me, I felt like Ozzy being the first one to go was appropriate. Considering that this guy, while I don't believe started heavy metal, he was one of the big icons of heavy metal. When you think of heavy metal, the first names you think of is Rob Halford, Lemmy, Tony Iommi to an extent, Ronnie James Dio, and Ozzy Osbourne. And while the dude was far from perfect, he basically left a massive impact on all of us. And basically, enjoy life till you can't no more. Rest in peace to the Prince of Darkness. So, folks, that concludes this video. This was a long video. I figured it was going to be. So this one's going to take a while for it to upload. This thing's over an hour and 35 minutes, 35 minutes, I should say. But yeah, that's going to do it for my Ozzy ranking. So, hope you guys enjoy this video. Leave a list in the comments below. How would you rank the Ozzy Osbourne discography? Now, what am I going to be doing after Ozzy? Well, after the passing of one icon in metal, I will be unfortunately talking about another iconic frontman who is no longer with us due to different circumstances. I will be tackling all the studio albums from Michigan melodic death metal masters, the Black Dahlia Murder. And Trevor's passing was a little more tragic than Ozzy's because of how sudden it was, but it wasn't as impactful, I guess you could say. I'll find better ways to kind of talk about it, but I'll be doing all of the Black Dahlia Murder albums. So, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys did, make sure you guys leave a like, leave a comment, tap that big subscribe button, and tap the bell so when I upload, you guys will be notified. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Rest in peace, Ozzy. And as always, join the herd. Till the next video. Peace out.